Does life actually get better? How do you come back, get better from being lonely and extremely depressed? How do you create meaningful relationships when you are so screwed up? You can't live a meaningful life in a day, but you can have a slightly better day at a time. Strive towards having a better day first. Start with one conversation, one relationship at a time, and give yourself time to grow and get results. Consistent effort is what it takes to be better. I'm late, so this will probably get buried. In 2008 I lost my job. All I could get right away was McDonald's, so I took it. But it wasn't enough to pay all my bills. My car was repossessed. I got kicked out of my apartment. And I found out my girlfriend was cheating on me, all within the space of a month or so. It was the lowest period of my life. I struggled with depression, considered suicide. It just wasn't a good time. I was homeless. But I had good friends who gave me a place to stay, so I was never actually on the streets. It took a while, but today I have a good job. I apprenticed in the tool and die trade, and I make good money for a guy who barely graduated high school and never went to college. I'm married, and my home life is stable. It's not perfect. Life never is. But I'm far better than I was. I hope everyone in this thread who is struggling is able to find a way to better days as well. Go to therapy, counseling. The other suggestions are great, but I don't think these people understand what it's like to go through depression. You don't merely snap out of it by doing the things they suggested. Find a good therapist, and if you cannot afford one, look for support groups of others who are also experiencing depression and talk about your struggles with them. Mental health counseling, along with the things the others have mentioned, will go a long way. I don't know if life gets better or you get better. I've struggled with depression for most of my life. The thing is that my mental toils grow stronger with every other struggle I have to deal with. Summers used to make me extremely happy. Well, content is maybe a better word, because I could only be focused on work and making money. College was horrible because it took almost 6 years, and the only thing I envisioned my diploma to be was a giant question mark instead of a marker of success. I was tired, angry and overwhelmed for those 6 years. I thought about killing myself a couple times because of all the strain, but I thought that if I killed myself, I wouldn't have known if I'd have finished school. But school was so difficult to complete. Your whole life you hear that a degree brings happiness and success. It doesn't. But school is done with. Do I have a career to show for it? A nice new car and a house? No, I have debt, but at the same time I'm carefree. So to answer your question, depression might not go away, but you will mature and things will get easier, but it's never truly gone. Everything in life is temporary. Good times, bad times, all temporary. But if you were happy, you would never think to yourself, wow, this happiness is gonna last forever and will never change. When depressed, we have a tendency to think nothing will ever change. But this is the source of the depression. You need to abandon the narratives you've created for yourself. You aren't some weirdo who is screwed up. Most people in your situation would likely become depressed. Hence why it's endemic, and suicide is the biggest killer of young men. You are just a normal person. You're not the problem. It's our sick, shitty world. You're just reacting appropriately to it. It will change for me when I started to view my depression and anxiety as non-narratively. They weren't a sign of weakness or failure. It was an underlying functional problem with my biology and thinking. It wasn't anything to be ashamed about. Indeed, it's not an emotion-inducing event. Depression, like all disease, is morally neutral. Risk factors of depression aren't things like bad personality or boring or dumb. Risk factors for depression are things like lack of physical activity, poor diet, genetics. None are statements about you as a person. It took years, but slowly I changed how I thought. I did some great cognitive behavioral therapy. I started to become aware of the thoughts that went through my head, and aware of how those thoughts would trigger negative emotion. By simply observing and discarding those thoughts, I can stop tormenting myself. The biggest thing you can do is be kind to yourself. Give yourself a break. You're going through a really tough time. My rule when self-talking is never say anything to myself I wouldn't say to a friend. I am a friend to myself. I take care of myself. I don't tell myself I'm pathetic for this or that anymore. Another thing I really remember my therapist saying, act, don't feel. If you wait until you feel like going out to a coffee shop, You will never go. The act of going is what will make you feel better. Lack of activity is strongly linked to depression. It's why anxiety often leads to depression. Your brain wants to act, but you are too afraid. So you do nothing, and that act of thinking about doing something and then not doing it sends bad signals. Humans want to be free and have agency. It's a long road, but you need to learn to love yourself. You're worth it. We all are. We're not weak because of this shit. And one day this rough patch in life will become your armor. Every time life gets rough, I remind myself it's a cakewalk compared to the shit I've been through. Literally nothing can hurt me anymore, really. It's been said before on here, but it's always worth finding someone awesome in your life and sticking with them. Doesn't have to be a partner or family member. It can be a dog, or a Twitch chat community. Find somewhere you belong and fit in, whether it's with one person or many. I saw some of these mentioned in other comments, but I'm just going to make a list. A previous employer chose to see my mental health and my work performance as two separate issues, which led to the worst panic attack I've ever experienced and a case of burnout that I'm still wrestling with approximately 3 years later. So a lot of these things come from what I had to fight through over those years. Counseling, therapy, professionally is probably best, but you also have to shop around for a therapist you work well with. Sometimes, barring that, I'd try talking to a family member or very close friend. Someone you know you can talk to anything about, even if it's just to vent. I live alone, but I have a dog service dog in training. I've resorted to talking to her a few times, and even that has helped. Don't let yourself sit at home all day. I know full well I can only speak for myself, but I was always amazed at how the simple act of walking through the door suddenly lifted a huge weight off my chest, put a little spring in my step, and made it that much easier to just be more like my old self. Hang out with friends. Keep devoting whatever time you can to your hobbies, interests. Just go for a walk to clear your head. Even just a few minutes at a time is better than not at all. Take time to reflect. This has always been an invaluable tool for me again. I hope it's just as useful for you. And as I've recovered from various bouts of anxiety, depression, and whatever else I've dealt with over the years, the insight I seem to gain as I improve has helped me learn more from these experiences than I would have if I had just said, oh good, I'm on the road to recovery, and push the bad stuff out of my head on the spot. Try to find things in your life you have full control over. Are they good things? Awesome. Keep them that way, or make them even more awesome if you can. Are they not so good things? Do what you can to mitigate the bad and make them better, or just get rid of them if there isn't another option. I agree with a lot of the previously stated advice. If your loneliness and depression are connected, I agree that therapy or counseling would be a good move. In addition to that, you can also reframe your alone time. Not all activities have to be done socially. I don't have a lot of friends and never have. One of the things that I really enjoy is going camping or backpacking. It feels really good to be out in nature in a place where being alone isn't a bad thing. I garden. It felt really good to pick and eat a blackberry from a plant that I'd taken care of since it was a tiny little seedling. It's also nice to spoil yourself once in a while. I do this from time to time with cooking when my wife is out of town, because I'm a little more adventurous and eater and cook than she is. Made coq au vin from scratch, I mean. I bought the chicken from the store. I didn't raise it from an egg and slaughter it myself. Took me like 3 hours to prep and cook from beginning to end, but it tasted badass and I'm worth spending 3 hours on. I have 3 dogs and will stop and say hit to every other dog I meet. Always been more of a dog person than a people person anyway, but it's really comforting how a dog that doesn't know a thing about me will still wag his tail if I come up to say hi. Dogs are simple and awesome that way. Relationships happen because you have a life to share, so don't go looking for it. Build a life for yourself first. Self-improvement, exercise, nutrition. Get a plant or pet and bond with it so you have some form of responsibility and a reason to become more disciplined. Once you've sorted out the basics, find what would make you happy or proud of yourself and actively chase down that dream. Sometimes it helps to remember that you could put yourself in an absolute hell if you left things deteriorate. So spend a bit of time contemplating how easily things could get way worse if you did nothing. Just don't ever forget, you have something to contribute to life. Even if others cannot or do not appreciate what you are doing, every small step helps. Give it time. As a last piece of advice, do a year of yes. If someone asks you to do something and you cannot immediately think of a proper argument to say no, say yes and go do it.